This is the Galaxy Deck Builder system from Journey Mountain Studios. It's my new favorite tool for generating planets and star systems on the fly. You get planet traits, star systems, planets, spooky planets, nice little expansion that came through the other day, uncharted planets for planets that you don't just know what they are, you want to go and find out. Tech levels, random tech level cards. Asteroids, you need asteroids, we got asteroids. And also the star system mats, which are a series of plates that you can put together to generate your very own star system. So how does it work? Well, you draw a star system. I've drawn this one here. Let's slap some planets down. And as our hero's spaceship flies through space, we can add in traits. We can then say, oh, they've also got an ammonia atmosphere. All of the cards have got just so much cool detail on them, even the planet cards themselves. Also, just really cool information for you as the GM. That is the Galaxy Builder decks from Journey Mountain Studios, available on DriveThruRPG. Link in the doobly-doo down below. Creating a character in Star Trek Adventures 2 is super simple and just an absolute pleasure. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy and today we are looking at the Star Trek Adventures 2 character creator. It's a process that I think is a lot of fun, and they actually have two different approaches to character creation. One is the traditional, where you create the character before the game begins, and the other is that you create the character as you go along. Now, bearing in mind, Star Trek Adventures 2 also has the concept that not only are you going to be creating your main character, but you are also going to create, as the game progresses, supporting characters that you will be in charge of. Now, the supporting characters are only going to appear as and when they are needed, and as and when your main character is actually not available. The entire principle of the supporting character is that they are there for you to roleplay when your main character just wouldn't naturally be there. Let's get into it. Let's create our very first character. This is the character sheet for Star Trek Adventures 2nd edition, or Star Trek 2 as I'm going to call it moving forward. It's nice and simple, nice and straightforward. It's only a page long. Lots of room for descriptors, not a lot of room for numbers, which is why I love this system. It's such a narrative system. We're going to fill this in and learn as we go. The first 6 blocks of the page, we can't fill in just yet. Name, rank, assignment, pronouns, character role, and reputation. That we can't fill in just yet because we need to understand what our species is first. Species comes with species and traits. So what are traits? Traits within Star Trek 2 are a single word or a phrase that are a catch-all for a collection of associated things. So, for example, betazoids have the trait of being telepathic. So they have the ability to some degree to sense emotions or the surface thoughts of others and to project telepathic communication. Traits are also applicable, by the way, to starships and to environments. You can have an environment that has the trait of, let's say, being on fire. The trait of being on fire is a single term, and you could say being on fire comes with it. There's going to be smoke, there's going to be heat, there's going to be potential damage to anyone in the room. The fire has the potential to spread. These are important things that we have to bear in mind as the trait of being on fire. So we need to choose our species and the trait that goes with it, and I think we should make a Bajoran. So let's make a Bajoran. There are so many species that come with the Star Trek 2 book. So let's choose a Bajoran. Now, what are the implications of Bajoran? Well, Bajorans, until 2350, or even later than that, the early 60s, were under the occupation of the Cardassians. Bajor was an occupied planet, and the Bajorans were either enslaved by the Cardassians, indentured by the Cardassians, or were resistance fighters to the Cardassian occupation. So your character, if you are playing a game set before 2368, let's say, or even a little bit later than that, your character most likely will be either a refugee from Bajor or will have escaped Bajor and will be out in space. after the Federation took over Deep Space Nine and the Cardassian occupation was officially ended, well, now suddenly the universe opened up to Bajorans and they could go and explore and they could join Starfleet and have a look and see what was going on. So the Bajorans have as a trait, they tend to be hostile towards Cardassians, resentful of those who are dismissive or who turned a blind eye to the Bajoran occupation. And although not all of them are super spiritual, they all, to a degree, have a cultural understanding of the prophets that dwell within the celestial temple, of the wormhole. There you go. That is the species and the trait. Something else that species give us is a little bit further down the character sheet called the species ability. And the species ability is literally a unique ability to that species, and it allows us to do certain things under certain circumstances. So the Bajoran species ability is the will of the prophets. You may find strength in the prophets even when the situation is dire. Once per adventure, when the game master spends 3 or more threat, you gain 1 determination. We learned about threat last week. Threat is the momentum version of what the game master gets. They can spend threat to increase damage or to increase the severity of a trait of a space, or to increase the difficulty of a task and things like that. We will talk about determination in a little bit when we get to determination. Something else that the characters give us, they give us attribute changes. So last week we spoke very briefly about the attribute and department system, the way that it works. A very quick reminder, the GM will ask you to make an attribute plus department roll. And so, for example, you might choose fitness plus security. You add the 2 values that are represented in fitness and security, and that's the number that you have to roll equal to or under in order to gain successes on your 2d20. So attributes get modified by our species, and what immediately happens here, and this is going to get a little bit messy because we're building this as we go. Control gains a +1, as does daring, because we have lived in difficult circumstances, and insight gives us 1 as well. So we are quite used to sussing out what the opposition are thinking or doing potentially. So now we can choose our character name, and with Bajorans, as I said before, surname first or family name first, and then we go from there. Now, of course, in the book, they give us a whole bunch of names to choose from if we don't want to make up our own names, or we can just go with them. So let's make it Alan Green, and we're going to turn that into a Bajoran name. So it would be Green Alan would be how it would normally be pronounced. Let's do Alan with an A, and let's Bajorify it. So Alan, let's just get rid of one of the A's. So it's Alan, and then Green, let's put in a Y there. And let's say Garen. So Alan, Garen Alan. Let's change that and put a B there. So Garen Ballan. Too many N's, I think. Let's change this to an I. So we have Balai, and it's Garen Balai. So technically it would, the character would be a Lieutenant Garen, and Balai is their first name. So there we go. Right, so that's my process, by the way, folks. I change the names around. If you want tutorials on that, I've got a tutorial on how to create names using real names. And pronouns, let's just say that it is a he, him. You're, of course, free to choose whatever pronouns you are comfortable playing with. Star Trek has got a wonderful representation across the board and has had for many years. Now we move on to our environment, which is our next box. And the environment is a way of looking at your character's upbringing. Where did they come from? What benefits do they have? What is their point of view, for example, having been born where they are born? And there's a random table that you can roll on, which is really cool. Examples are you were born on a colony, a busy colony, a frontier colony. You were born on different species homeworld. Perhaps you were born on a starship. So there's all these kind of cool things. I'm going to randomly roll a dice here. You heard that number there. That is a 7, and that is a frontier colony. each of those come with a set of things. So the very first thing that we need to look at is our values. A value is a statement about your character. It describes their morals, their ethics, their behaviors. It's a very broad category that over time you start to refine, you can change. Your values should actually oppose one another to create an interesting character. And as you play the game, your values should be motivating your character to do certain things, to react in certain ways, as well as to look at what they are doing, learn from it, change. And so if you have a value at the beginning of the game, which is, let's say, hates Cardassians, and by the end of 7 or 8 adventures, your character has learned to work with Cardassians, that value will change from hates Cardassians to perhaps is unsure about Cardassians. And a couple of adventures later, when they become friends with a Cardassian, maybe then is forgiving of Cardassians or is accepting of Cardassians. So this value journey is really, really important. It also gives you mechanical benefits in-game. In the meantime, however, the frontier colony, that is our environment that generates a value for us. And at this step, the character gains a single value. This value should reflect the environment and culture the character was raised within. So Balai was not born on Bajor. Perhaps that means Balai was not part of the occupation, and his parents weren't part of it either. What if Balai's parents had actually fled the occupation? And so he doesn't have those occupation war stories. He's not one of the traditional Bajorans. That gives him some interesting perspectives. I would say as a value, Balai feels like an outsider. Now that's pretty cryptic, but what is that going to mean for me during the game? Well, I feel that every time Balai feels like he's being left out or is being excluded, this is going to come back to haunt him. That he's always felt excluded. He's never felt part of his species. And so if there's contact with Cardassians, if there's contact with Bajorans, I think that's going to be something tough for him. What I'm also going to do is go back and modify this and say it doesn't hate Cardassians because he really wasn't part of the occupation. I think he resents Cardassians. We also get some more attribute updates due to our environment. That is a simple addition. Choose one of the following attributes and increase by 1. Control or fitness. I'm going to say let's improve fitness. This colony world was a tough space. I'm going to make a note here. Tough life of survival. We can also give it a name. I can go and look into the star charts and see what planets are nearby. I can chat to the GM, see what I should add in there as well. So there's lots of things that I can do with that. Finally, we can choose a department. So the department, it says choose one. Either con, security, medicine, and increase it by 1. Let's do security because we said it was a tough life of survival. So that's a 1 there. Do you notice how in creating this character, I'm not focused specifically on a direction for the character. I'm just exploring this character. Balai might be a commander, Balai, a ship's captain. Balai might be a doctor. We don't know yet. We're still exploring. At the moment, definitely a lot of physical stuff coming through. Next up, we go to our upbringing. Upbringing is, again, how did we handle our early years? At what point did we accept our upbringing, or what point did we rebel against it? And again, there's a random table, and I'm going to randomly roll on that table things like we grew up in an agricultural or a rural environment, or a science and technology-based kind of frontier colony. What was it? It was interesting. It was a science or technology space. I'm going to say science. The Bajorans weren't exactly technologically advanced by the time that we met them. We know that they were culturally very advanced earlier on, but they weren't particularly sophisticated when we first met. The character's home was one filled with the potential of science, and cutting-edge developments were familiar ground. If the character accepted this upbringing, they are rational, methodical, and precise. If they rebelled, they don't lack technological talent, but they haven't developed the talent further and are relying more on instinct. I'm going to say Belai felt like he was an outsider. He didn't feel like he was a Bajoran. And so I don't feel like rebelling would be his thing. I think rebelling is what Bajorans did on the homeworld. He didn't do that. So he's going to say accepted. And so what that does is that gives us an increase in control by 2. And our reasoning goes up by 1 to 1. So we're getting a pretty good spread at the moment. Talents and focuses. Right. What are they? A focus is a specific area of study within a department. So, for example, within science, you might have astrophysics, or you might have subspace communications. Within engineering, you might have transporter systems or warp field mechanics. Under medicine, you might have xenobiology or paleobiology, where you're looking at ancient DNA strands and things. So focuses allow you to really create a more unique character, and they give you benefits in the game. How it works in game is that when you are making a role, whenever you're making a task role, if your focus applies to the situation, so for example, you have astrophysics and you are trying to calculate the impact of a star being destroyed on the gravitational effect across the galaxy, you would use astrophysics. You'd say, well, this is applicable. So the GM might say, all right, well, give me a reason plus science check, and you have a focus in it. What this means is every die roll that is equal to or under the value of your reason plus science counts as a critical success. So that means if you get 2 normal successes with a focus applied to it, suddenly you've got 4, because every critical success counts as 2 successes. So focuses are really important. But we also get a +1 to one of the following departments: engineering, con, science, or medicine. I feel like it's got to go into science, right? Let's put it into science because, well, it just feels appropriate. So let's put it in 1 into science. And what is one of our focuses going to be? I feel like we should say at this point, let's go with power systems. And the reason why I suggest that we go with power systems is because in my head, the idea that this frontier colony was in a tough place, it was difficult to survive in. And so why were they there in the first place? Well, maybe the family was there looking into power systems and understanding power systems. And if that's the case, then I'm going to say, let's change the 1 from science and let's put it into engineering instead. That's the department. The focus we've already applied, and then we gain a talent. Now, talents we will look at in a little bit because we're going to be gaining a whole bunch of talents over time. So I'm going to just simply say +1 here. Now that we're done with that, step 4, career path. What was the path that the character followed? Where did they go? How did they transcend from where they were to where they are currently? We've got a table that gives us 1 set of options, and then we've got another table that is based off of what we rolled. So here we go, rolling the dice. Let's see where we ended up. We are an officer in Starfleet. And with that, we have to roll once again on the charts just to see 1, 2, or 3 command, operations, or sciences basically is where we end up. Now, you don't have to randomly roll, by the way. You can always choose if you want to. I'm going to roll and just see, well, the dice is saying operations. So I think that makes sense. We're going into operations. And again, depends on what the ship might be. So we might be an operations officer, like Lieutenant Commander Data was, or we might just be an engineer, like, let's say, for example, Geordie LaForge. So I think we're going to go engineering. We gain a trait, and that trait is Starfleet Officer. What does that mean? And that means I follow the law, I will follow orders, I respect the chain of command, all that kind of wonderful stuff. Value, right, time for some more values. This is always fun. We have abandonment issues, but we also now gain an additional one. Improvise, it'll fit. I feel like that is appropriate to a frontier colony. They're not going to have access to the most amazing things out there. Our attributes change. We gain 3 points, which may be split between 2 or 3 attributes up to our choice. We should probably add at least 1 to reason. Let's add 1 to daring. And then let's do 1 to fitness. So that's our 3 added there. And then we have departments. The player must select either engineering or security as the character's major, the subject they study the most intensely. This department is increased by 2. We are going to do engineering. So this is increased by 2, so that puts it on 3. Then the player selects 2 other departments, the character's minor subjects. So we majored in engineering, and then we have 2 minors. And these are increased by 1, and a character may not have any department higher than 4. We probably would do a minor in science. That would help us. I don't see medicine as being something that he's particularly interested in. Con, flying ships may be useful. Command, I don't think he wants to be in charge of anyone. He feels like an outsider. So I think he probably would have gone with flying, given that option. Focuses. The character selects 3 focuses, at least one of which should relate to the character's chosen track. Transporters and replicators is fun. Let's go with computers. That's 2. I want to choose something that's not really too related to that sort of thing. So let's go with survival. We then gain another talent. We now move on to step 5, which is experience. And experience is basically you deciding what type of character you want to play. And the reason why it's important for you to choose experience is you can be a novice, you can be someone who is experienced, or you can be a veteran. And these add in benefits, various bonuses, but they don't necessarily apply in terms of what your rank is on board the starship. It just means you've been around the block or you haven't. I'm going to say Belai is a novice because I feel like that would be fun. That gives us the value that we get to add, another value, which is super cool. And I feel like his should be, I must find where I belong. And then we gain a talent, and in this case, it's a prescribed talent that we have gained. The character receives the untapped potential talent. Select one of your attributes when you receive this talent. You're inexperienced, but talented and with a bright future. You may not have or increase any attribute to above 11 or any department above 4 whilst you have this talent. However, whenever you succeed at a task at which you bought 1 or more additional dice by any means, so by momentum or threat, roll a d20 after the roll. If your roll is equal to or less than the chosen attribute, gain 1 bonus momentum. If you roll higher, add 1 threat. When you possess this talent, you cannot gain any higher rank than Lieutenant Junior grade. So what this does is this gives us a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful journey to take with this character. We're going to generate momentum. We're going to generate threat. And eventually, this talent will change. And you'll see that those change during milestones, which is when we're leveling up. So now we can go up here and we can fill in rank. We now know that we can't be higher than a Lieutenant Junior. So that means we are starting as an ensign. We now choose our career events. And career events are little highlights which have happened during your career thus far and that you can call and fall back on and refer to. So you get 2 career events, just to give you some flavor. And again, there's a d20 table for us to roll on. I'm going to do that. So the first one that we have is a serious injury. Oh dear. What happened to Belai? Serious injury. But while we're on the random table, we might as well generate the second career event, which was a death of a friend. Right, let's go and have a look at serious injury. The character was seriously hurt and needed to spend a considerable amount of time recovering. So the attribute, we gain +1 fitness. We also gain +1 in medicine because we've been around doctors so long. What else? Focus, we get another focus. should reflect the circumstances of the character's injury, something that helped them through the recovery or something they took up after recovering. I am going to say that their focus was on meditation, calming the mind. Then they gain another trait, which should reflect some lasting effect of the character's injury or the way they recovered. For example, a prosthetic implant or some form of disability. What if, instead of a prosthetic, what if we had a limp? We now have that as a trait, so he limps. So if we're doing running or something like that, I think he's going to get a negative to that. I will leave it blank for now as to what it was, but that's the joy of this process, is you can choose what it was and add to it. And of course, you don't have to choose before the game starts. If someone says, hey, why do you have a limp? Oh, well, it was a long story. Let me make it up quickly as we go along. It makes it more exciting, I think. Finally, we've got to look at the death of a friend. This was something else that happened. So an attribute increase, our insight goes up by 1. We also have +1 to medicine. Interesting. He had no interest in it, but it's slowly been creeping into his space. So that's fun. And then he gets another focus. I'm going to say that the focus is virology, because their friend died of a disease of some kind. Again, I don't have to define it just yet, but what it did was inspired them to go and study viruses. And that's why the medicine is increased as well. And so died of viral infection. At this stage, the character is almost complete. The character receives a final value. Body is a machine. Respect it. Repair it, upgrade it. I feel like that's a good value for the character to have, because they've had serious injury and they got fixed. A friend died of a viral infection. Their fitness is 3, so the body is obviously important to them. We can now apply some basics. So all starting characters have a base of +7 in their attributes. Then all departments begin with a 1 in them as well to represent basic training. Now that we have got to this point, we've made sure that none of our attributes are above 12, or in the novice case above 11, and none of our departments are above 5 or above 4 for the novice with untapped potential. We now get to add +1 to 2 attributes. So I'm going to bring up this reason. I'm going to say that reason goes to 10, and I'm going to say that fitness goes to an 11 with this whole my body is a temple kind of thing. We haven't violated the rules. We still haven't gone above 11. So we're okay there. In terms of departments, we get to increase 2 departments by 1 again. We can't increase engineering. I don't feel like medicine would be increased by anything again. We're going to put some into science. So we've got a little bit more support there for our computers and things along those lines. And then let's put 1 more into, I would say, security. Security represents the physical body as well as that sort of thing. So that works out there. In addition, you may now select 1 extra talent. Now, when it comes to talents, we've got just a whole bunch of talents to choose from, which is wonderful. There are some engineering talents, which I am definitely going to pick up, as well as some generic talents that I'm going to add to. I know my ship. When working on a technical issue with the ship, the first additional D20 purchase is free. Normally it costs you a momentum. Now it would be free. So that's pretty cool. The next one's going to cost me 1, and the next one after that's going to cost me 2. It's a lot cheaper to buy those additional D20s. I've still got 2 talents to choose from. Let me choose something really quickly. This one I feel is appropriate to improvise. It'll fit my value, and it's called Jury Rig. Now, I do require an engineering of 4+. I have an engineering of 4, so that's fine. Jury Rig, I can attempt to repair the ship, and I can reduce the difficulty of that repair by 2. Now, difficulty is determined by the damage values of the weapon that was fired at us. It will have a severity rating That severity rating is what sets the difficulty. We can reduce that difficulty by 2 down to 0 if we really want to, but it means that the repair only lasts until the end of the scene, and we can spend a momentum to increase that for an additional scene. So we finish the battle with the enemy, we jump to warp to get away, and by the time we get to the end of that warp, that's the end of the next scene. That's it. The repair fails, and we would have to repair it normally again. So that's a pretty cool trait to have. We've got one trait left, and I don't want it to be from engineering. I want it to be from something completely different. I'm going to look at the general talents. I think we're going to take this one, which is called Tough, and that increases our max stress by 2. Now that we have completed our talents, we can now go and select a pastime. And pastimes it's a hobby or it's a passion. It's something that you did to relax or to have fun with. And so pastimes, here we go. We've got it here. The pastime, it could be knowledge gathering. It could be sports. It could be self-improvement. It could be performance, creative, crafts. I feel like we're in a frontier. He's on his own. He's fairly isolated. So I would say hollow novel writing. So he's a creative hollow novel writer. If they are relevant to the task that is being attempted, then it could act as a focus. So if I have to rewrite a hollow program, not the actual coding itself, because that would be, I would say, actual coding or computers as the focus. But if I have to rewrite a novel or add dialogue on the fly or something like that, I feel like that would then be applicable. Of course, it's up to the GM to decide. A main character begins play with a reputation rating of 3. That reputation can go up or down depending on whether we are fulfilling various things. So we know that we are a Starfleet officer. If we perform our duties as Starfleet in accordance with Starfleet, our reputation goes up. If we are dismissive of Cardassians, if we are aggressive towards Cardassians, that's against Starfleet protocol, our reputation might go down. For example, they say that a reputation of 0 is that you barely fit in, whereas a reputation of 6 is that you have an exemplary record and you're thought of very highly amongst your members, your peers, those in the field and things like that. So we now get to calculate our stress. And our stress is equal to our fitness level. And in our case, it's actually our fitness level plus 2. So we're looking at a stress of 13, which is pretty cool. Once we've taken 13 stress, we become fatigued, and things can go wrong very, very quickly after that point. When your stress bar is full, you choose an attribute. You simply cannot use that attribute anymore, and the difficulty of all your tasks goes up. So you don't want your stress to basically get too high. Resistance at the moment is 0 because we don't have any resistance to anything. We don't have any armor. We've got nothing like that whatsoever. So our resistance is 0. All right, let's talk about determination as the very last thing that we need to worry about. Determination, we start with 1. That's what you start with at the beginning of the game. And you can never have more than 3 determination. So when you are in a situation where your value could be expressed, you can spend determination. You can spend determination to create like the perfect opportunity. So you can select a single D20 and set that as having rolled 1, for example. You could use determination to re-roll any number of D20s in your existing dice pool. And then you can use it for something a little bit different. You could use it to immediately gain access to a single talent that you don't normally possess if you wanted to. But that's basically how it works. Now, when you attempt a task that is difficult, but your value makes it more difficult. So your challenge goes up because of your value. In the case of Belai, I must find where I belong in the galaxy. If they are attempting to do a persuasion check on someone, they're trying to convince someone to join the Federation, they themselves are not part of the Federation. They don't feel as if they're part of this whole thing. They feel like an outsider. So this is something that's definitely going to stand in their way. It increases the difficulty. If we succeed, then we gain a point of determination because we have driven through it. And that is how you create your character. Now, all we need to do is create a portrait of that character. If we have any special rules, if we have any specific equipment, or if we want to add the weapons that we're using just to list out our attacks there, that's really useful as well. That is character creation within Star Trek Adventures 2nd edition. That's it from me for this week. Character creation is, I think, a joy. I hope that you agree with me. It's a lovely process where you're adding and combining and generating this character who suddenly comes to life in front of you. And I'm always excited to go, oh, I want to play this character now and see how well they do. Enough from me. Firstly, a huge thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this channel going and who are getting a map of Braxia with all of the setting stuff in it each month. You can check that out on patreon.com/greatgm. And secondly, a big thank you to you for watching all the way until the very end. Until next time, I wish you and yours the happiest of gaming.